In the marble halls of Renaissance Florence, where power shifted like morning shadows and alliances crumbled faster than autumn leaves, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a fundamental truth about human nature that would echo through centuries. He watched as men of apparent strength were brought low by their own desperate need for validation, while others, seemingly less formidable, commanded respect through their ability to walk away from any situation that compromised their integrity. This observation would become one of his most profound insights into the mechanics of power and influence. The year was 1513, and Machiavelli, recently fallen from grace with the Medici Restoration, found himself imprisoned and tortured for his republican sympathies. Yet even in his darkest hour, stripped of titles and influence, he demonstrated the very principle he would later articulate: the power of independence. Rather than begging for mercy or compromising his beliefs to regain favor, he retreated to his estate and began writing what would become The Prince, turning his exile into his greatest triumph. This transformation from political prisoner to immortal philosopher exemplified the core principle that would define his understanding of true power: those who can walk away from any situation, no matter how advantageous it might appear, possess an invincible strength that cannot be conquered by external forces. It is not the man who clings desperately to position, relationship, or opportunity who commands respect, but the one who demonstrates that his self-worth exists independent of these external validations. The concept of walking away as a source of power runs counter to modern intuitions about success and achievement. In contemporary society, we are taught that persistence is the ultimate virtue, that never giving up is the hallmark of character, and that those who walk away are quitters. Yet Machiavelli understood something deeper about the psychology of power dynamics that our achievement-obsessed culture often misses. The ability to walk away is not an admission of weakness but a demonstration of strength so profound that it shifts the entire balance of any relationship or negotiation. Consider the merchant princes of Machiavelli's time. The most successful among them were not those who desperately sought every deal or partnership, but those who could afford to refuse offers that did not meet their standards. Their willingness to walk away from profitable but compromising arrangements paradoxically made them more valuable as partners and more respected as competitors. This dynamic played out in politics as well, where the most influential advisors were often those who could credibly threaten to withdraw their counsel rather than those who clung to their positions at any cost. The psychology behind this phenomenon is rooted in the fundamental human tendency to value what is scarce and respect what cannot be easily obtained. When a person demonstrates that they are willing to walk away from an opportunity, relationship, or situation, they communicate several powerful messages simultaneously: they have options, they have standards, they value themselves highly enough to refuse what does not serve them, and they are not desperate for what is being offered. This combination of signals triggers an almost involuntary respect response in others, even in those who might otherwise seek to exploit or manipulate. Machiavelli witnessed this dynamic repeatedly in the courts and counting houses of Renaissance Italy. He observed how Lorenzo de' Medici commanded respect not through desperate maneuvering to maintain power, but through his apparent indifference to whether others chose to follow his leadership. This indifference was not genuine apathy but rather a cultivated stance that communicated his belief in his own value independent of others' recognition. When Lorenzo faced opposition from rival families or foreign powers, his response was never to plead or compromise his principles but to calmly present his position and make it clear that he was prepared to proceed alone if necessary. This approach consistently resulted in others seeking to align with Lorenzo rather than the reverse. His willingness to walk away from alliances that required him to compromise his vision actually strengthened his position by attracting followers who valued his integrity and leadership. Those who tried to pressure him into unwanted agreements soon discovered that their leverage was illusory, as Lorenzo's genuine preparedness to proceed independently made their threats meaningless. The power of walking away extends beyond mere negotiation tactics or political maneuvering. At its core, it represents a fundamental orientation toward life that prioritizes internal validation over external approval. This orientation is what Machiavelli meant when he spoke of destroying one's weak self. The weak self is that aspect of personality that desperately needs validation, approval, and security from external sources. It is the part of us that would rather endure a degrading situation than face the uncertainty of walking away. The process of destroying this weak self is not about becoming callous or indifferent to others, but about developing such a strong sense of internal worth that external circumstances cannot shake it. This internal strength manifests as the ability to make decisions based on principles rather than fear, to value long-term integrity over short-term advantage, and to maintain dignity even in the face of loss or rejection. Machiavelli understood that this internal transformation was not achieved overnight but required consistent practice in choosing difficult right actions over comfortable wrong ones. Each time a person chooses to walk away from a situation that compromises their values, they strengthen their capacity for independence. Each time they choose immediate gratification or security over integrity, they weaken it. The accumulation of these choices over time determines whether a person develops the kind of unshakable foundation that commands respect or remains vulnerable to manipulation and control. The Renaissance period provided countless examples of both types of individuals. On one hand were the courtiers who would do anything to maintain their positions, who compromised their beliefs and dignity for temporary security, and who lived in constant fear of losing what they had gained through supplication. These individuals, regardless of their titles or apparent success, were viewed with contempt by their peers and lived lives of quiet desperation, always vulnerable to the whims of those whose approval they craved. On the other hand were individuals like Machiavelli himself, who when faced with the choice between compromising his republican ideals and facing imprisonment, chose imprisonment. This choice, which appeared to be a defeat, ultimately established his credibility and moral authority in a way that no amount of political maneuvering could have achieved. His willingness to sacrifice his immediate comfort and security for his principles demonstrated the kind of character strength that time has vindicated. The dynamic of respect through walking away operates across all areas of human interaction, from intimate relationships to business dealings to political negotiations. In romantic relationships, the individuals who command the deepest respect and love are not those who cling desperately to their partners, constantly seeking reassurance and validation, but those who love fully while maintaining their independence and self-respect. They are prepared to walk away from relationships that do not honor their worth, and this preparedness paradoxically makes them more attractive and valued partners. In business, the entrepreneurs and executives who build lasting success are typically those who can walk away from deals that do not align with their vision or values. They understand that saying no to the wrong opportunities is often more valuable than saying yes to mediocre ones. Their willingness to walk away from immediate profits or partnerships that would compromise their long-term mission earns them respect from competitors, customers, and employees alike. The mechanism by which walking away generates respect is rooted in several psychological principles that Machiavelli intuitively understood. First, it demonstrates scarcity. When someone is willing to walk away, it suggests that what they offer is valuable enough that they do not need to compromise to find appreciation for it. This scarcity principle is fundamental to human psychology. We naturally value what is rare and respect what cannot be easily obtained. Second, walking away demonstrates standards. It shows that the person has clear criteria for what they will and will not accept, and that these criteria are not negotiable based on external pressure. This consistency is itself attractive because it suggests reliability and strength of character. People respect those who have clear boundaries and the courage to enforce them. Third, it reveals options. Someone who can walk away obviously believes they have alternatives. This belief in their own options, whether or not it is entirely accurate, creates an aura of strength and desirability. People want to be associated with those who have choices rather than those who are trapped by circumstances. Fourth, walking away demonstrates self-respect. It shows that the person values themselves highly enough to refuse treatment or situations that fall below their standards. This self-respect is contagious. Others tend to treat us the way we treat ourselves, and those who demonstrate high self-regard typically receive it from others as well. The cultivation of this ability to walk away begins with the development of what Machiavelli called virtue, not virtue in the modern sense of moral goodness, but rather the classical sense of excellence of character that encompasses courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. This virtue is not given but earned through the deliberate practice of choosing principle over convenience, long-term integrity over short-term gain, and self-respect over external validation. The process begins with honest self-assessment. One must identify the areas where desperation, neediness, or fear currently drive decision-making. These are the weak points where manipulation and exploitation typically occur. Common areas include financial security, romantic relationships, social acceptance, professional advancement, and family approval. The weak self manifests in each of these areas as a willingness to compromise fundamental values to avoid loss or gain acceptance. Once these vulnerable areas are identified, the next step is to systematically strengthen one's foundation in each. This means developing multiple options wherever possible, building skills and resources that reduce dependence on any single source of security, and, most importantly, cultivating the internal conviction that one's worth is not contingent on external circumstances. Financial independence is often the most practical starting point because money represents options and security in tangible form. This does not mean becoming wealthy, but rather developing the skills, savings, and mindset that make one capable of walking away from financial arrangements that compromise integrity. The person who lives paycheck to paycheck and would face immediate hardship if they lost their job cannot realistically walk away from situations that compromise their values, no matter how strong their character might be in other respects. Building financial flexibility might involve reducing expenses to create savings, developing multiple income streams, acquiring valuable skills that are in demand, or creating systems that generate passive income. The specific approach matters less than the result, the ability to make decisions based on what is right rather than what is financially necessary. Similarly important is the cultivation of social independence. This means building a network of relationships that provide emotional support and professional opportunity while avoiding dependence on any single relationship or group for validation or security. The person who desperately needs approval from one particular individual or group cannot walk away from situations where that approval is threatened, even when staying compromises their integrity. Social independence is developed by cultivating multiple meaningful relationships, developing self-awareness that reduces the need for external validation, and building confidence in one's own judgment and decision-making ability. It also requires the courage to be disliked when necessary, understanding that universal approval is neither possible nor desirable. Professional independence involves developing expertise and reputation that create options in the marketplace. This might mean building specialized skills that are in high demand, creating a track record of success that opens doors, developing a professional network that provides opportunities, or building a personal brand that attracts desirable partnerships. The goal is to reach a position where one can choose opportunities based on alignment with values and vision rather than desperate need for any available option. The emotional and psychological foundation for walking away is perhaps most crucial and often most challenging to develop. This involves cultivating what Stoic philosophers called preferred indifference, the ability to prefer certain outcomes while remaining genuinely unattached to whether they occur. This is not indifference or apathy, but rather the ability to want something while simultaneously being prepared to not have it. This emotional independence is developed through practices that strengthen internal validation systems. Regular self-reflection helps build awareness of one's own values and priorities independent of others' opinions. Setting and achieving personal goals builds confidence in one's own capabilities. Meditation or other contemplative practices can help develop the emotional regulation necessary to remain calm in situations where walking away might be necessary. Physical health and vitality also play a role in the ability to walk away. When someone feels strong and energetic, they are more likely to believe in their ability to handle whatever challenges walking away might create. Poor physical health often correlates with decreased confidence and increased desperation, making it harder to choose the difficult right path over the comfortable wrong one. The practice of walking away must be calibrated carefully to avoid the extremes of either weakness or rigidity. The goal is not to become someone who walks away from every difficulty or challenge, but rather someone who can walk away when staying would compromise fundamental values or self-respect. This requires developing discernment about when walking away serves integrity and when it merely serves comfort or convenience. True strength lies in staying when staying is right and walking away when walking away is right. Someone who never walks away may be demonstrating loyalty and persistence, but they may also be demonstrating an inability to enforce boundaries or maintain standards. Conversely, someone who always walks away at the first sign of difficulty may be demonstrating independence, but they may also be demonstrating an inability to commit or work through challenges. The key is developing the wisdom to distinguish between situations that call for perseverance and those that call for departure. This wisdom comes through experience, reflection, and a clear understanding of one's core values and non-negotiables. It requires the humility to acknowledge when one has made a mistake and needs to change course, as well as the courage to stay committed when external pressure suggests abandoning a worthy cause. In relationships, this might mean walking away from partnerships that consistently drain energy and compromise values while staying committed to those that honor and support mutual growth, even when they face temporary challenges. In business, it might mean walking away from opportunities that offer immediate profit but compromise long-term vision while staying committed to building something meaningful even when it requires short-term sacrifice. The respect that comes from the ability to walk away is not the goal itself but rather a natural consequence of living with integrity and self-respect. When the primary motivation for developing this ability is to gain others' respect or admiration, it becomes another form of external validation seeking that undermines the very independence it seeks to create. The goal must be internal, living in alignment with one's values and maintaining dignity regardless of external circumstances. This internal orientation is what Machiavelli meant when he spoke of destroying the weak self. The weak self seeks external validation, fears loss more than it values integrity, and makes decisions based on what others might think rather than what is right. Destroying this weak self does not mean becoming callous or indifferent to others, but rather developing such a strong internal foundation that external circumstances cannot compromise one's fundamental character. The process of destroying the weak self is ongoing and requires constant vigilance. Every day presents choices between the comfortable path that preserves external approval and security and the difficult path that maintains integrity and self-respect. The accumulation of these daily choices determines whether one develops the kind of unshakable character that commands respect or remains vulnerable to manipulation and control. Each time we choose to speak truth when lies would be more convenient, we strengthen our independence. Each time we choose to maintain our standards when compromise would be easier, we build our capacity to walk away when necessary. Each time we choose long-term integrity over short-term advantage, we invest in the kind of character that cannot be destroyed by external forces. The paradox of walking away is that those who can truly do it rarely need to. When others recognize that someone is genuinely prepared to walk away from situations that do not serve them, they typically modify their behavior to create situations that do serve them. The threat of departure, when credible, often prevents the need for actual departure. This dynamic plays out in negotiations of all kinds. The party who is genuinely prepared to walk away from a deal typically receives better terms than the party who desperately needs the agreement. The employee who is prepared to leave if their contributions are not valued typically receives better treatment than the employee who clings to their position regardless of how they are treated. The friend who is prepared to end relationships that are consistently one-sided typically enjoys more balanced and respectful friendships. However, this willingness to walk away must be genuine rather than strategic. People have an intuitive ability to distinguish between someone who is truly prepared to leave and someone who is merely using the threat as a negotiation tactic. The latter often backfires because it reveals desperation disguised as strength, while the former consistently produces respect and better treatment. The genuineness of one's willingness to walk away is tested in moments of pressure and difficulty. It is easy to claim independence when things are going well, but the true test comes when walking away would involve real sacrifice or loss. These moments reveal whether one's strength is genuine or merely performative. During the siege of Florence in 1529, long after Machiavelli had written his famous works, the city faced the choice between surrendering to preserve immediate safety and continuing to fight for their republican ideals despite overwhelming odds. Those who urged surrender claimed to be practical and realistic, while those who insisted on continued resistance were labeled idealistic and reckless. Yet it was the latter group who ultimately commanded respect from history, even though their choice led to immediate suffering and loss. This historical example illustrates the principle that walking away or standing firm often requires accepting short-term costs for long-term benefits. The weak self seeks to avoid all discomfort and loss, even when such avoidance compromises what matters most. The strong self is prepared to accept temporary setbacks in service of permanent principles. The development of this strength is not achieved through wishful thinking or positive affirmations, but through the gradual building of real capabilities and options. Someone who claims to be prepared to walk away while having no alternative sources of income, no valuable skills, no supportive relationships, and no emotional resilience is engaging in fantasy rather than developing genuine strength. Real strength comes from building real options. This means investing in skills that create career flexibility, relationships that provide emotional support, financial reserves that provide security, and internal resources that provide stability. With these foundations in place, the ability to walk away becomes genuine rather than theoretical. The process of building these foundations often requires short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. Spending time developing skills instead of consuming entertainment, saving money instead of spending on immediate pleasures, building relationships through service rather than seeking immediate benefit, and strengthening character through discipline rather than indulgence. These choices are often difficult in the moment but create the foundation for future independence. The respect that comes from genuine independence is qualitatively different from the attention that comes from neediness or performance. Needy behavior may attract sympathy or manipulation, and performative strength may attract admiration, but neither creates the deep respect that comes from encountering someone who genuinely does not need external validation to maintain their self-worth. This respect is valuable not because it feeds ego but because it creates space for authentic relationships and meaningful interactions. When others recognize that someone cannot be manipulated or controlled, they are more likely to engage authentically rather than strategically. This leads to relationships based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics, business partnerships based on shared value creation rather than exploitation, and social interactions based on genuine connection rather than performance. The ultimate goal is not to become someone who walks away from everything, but someone who can walk away from anything. This distinction is crucial because it separates genuine strength from mere avoidance or commitment phobia. The person who can walk away from anything has the freedom to choose what to walk toward, while the person who must walk away from everything is as trapped as the person who cannot walk away from anything. True freedom lies in having genuine choices and the wisdom to make decisions based on values rather than fear. This freedom is earned through the patient work of building capabilities, strengthening character, and developing the internal resources necessary to maintain dignity and integrity regardless of external circumstances. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because he has already overcome the only enemy that truly matters, the part of himself that would compromise his integrity for external validation. External enemies can threaten possessions, position, and even life itself, but they cannot touch the self-respect and internal worth of someone who has learned to validate themselves based on their own standards rather than others' approval. This internal victory is both the foundation and the goal of all other forms of strength. Political power, financial success, social influence, and personal relationships all become more achievable and more meaningful when built upon this foundation of genuine self-respect and independence. In our contemporary world, where social media amplifies the human tendency toward validation seeking and where economic pressures often force compromising choices, the ancient wisdom of Machiavelli remains remarkably relevant. The ability to walk away from toxic relationships, compromising business deals, degrading employment situations, or social pressures that demand conformity at the expense of integrity remains one of the most powerful tools for creating a life of meaning and respect. The challenge for modern individuals is to build this capacity in an environment that often rewards the opposite behaviors. Consumer culture encourages debt and dependence, social media rewards attention seeking over authenticity, and economic structures often punish those who refuse to compromise their values. Yet within these constraints, it remains possible to systematically build the foundations of genuine independence. This begins with small choices that prioritize long-term integrity over short-term comfort. Saving money instead of buying unnecessary items, developing skills instead of consuming entertainment, building authentic relationships instead of collecting social media followers, and strengthening character through discipline instead of seeking immediate gratification. These micro-choices accumulate over time to create the foundation for larger acts of independence and integrity. The respect that results from this approach is not guaranteed in every individual interaction, but it is virtually inevitable over time. People may not immediately recognize or appreciate someone's refusal to compromise their standards, but they invariably come to respect those who consistently demonstrate strength of character. This respect often manifests in unexpected ways, opportunities that arise specifically because someone is known for their integrity, relationships that deepen because others feel safe with someone who has clear boundaries, and influence that grows because people trust those who cannot be bought or manipulated. Most importantly, this approach creates internal satisfaction that is independent of external recognition. The person who has destroyed their weak self and developed genuine independence experiences a kind of peace and confidence that cannot be taken away by circumstances. They may face loss, rejection, failure, or criticism, but these external events cannot shake their fundamental sense of worth and dignity. This internal state is its own reward, beyond any external benefits it might create. It represents the fulfillment of human potential in its highest form, the development of character that is genuinely independent of circumstances while remaining connected to and caring about others. It is the paradox of strength that comes through surrendering the desperate need for external validation in order to gain the internal validation that no one can take away. The legacy of those who master this principle extends far beyond their individual lives. They become examples and inspirations for others who witness their strength and dignity. Their refusal to compromise their integrity gives others permission to hold higher standards for themselves. Their willingness to walk away from what does not serve them demonstrates that such strength is possible and worthwhile. In this way, the development of personal independence serves not just individual flourishing but social good. A society composed of individuals who cannot be easily manipulated or controlled is a society more likely to uphold justice, truth, and genuine human dignity. The personal work of destroying one's weak self thus becomes a contribution to the broader human project of creating communities worthy of our highest aspirations. The journey toward this kind of independence is not easy, but it is perhaps the most worthwhile work any individual can undertake. It requires patience, courage, wisdom, and persistence, but it offers rewards that touch every aspect of life. Most importantly, it offers the deep satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with one's highest values and deepest convictions. In the end, Machiavelli's insight remains as true today as it was 5 centuries ago. They respect the man who can walk away because such a man has demonstrated mastery over himself, and self-mastery is the foundation of all other forms of strength and influence. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because he has built his foundation on something stronger than any external force, the unshakable conviction that his worth is intrinsic, his dignity is non-negotiable, and his integrity is more valuable than any external reward. This is the ultimate form of practical wisdom, understanding that in a world full of external pressures and temptations, the greatest victory is not over others but over the weak aspects of oneself. This victory, once achieved, creates a form of strength that time cannot diminish, circumstances cannot shake, and others cannot help but respect. It is the kind of strength that builds lasting success, meaningful relationships, and a life of genuine dignity and worth.